Welcome to Greenhouse Grower to Grower, the podcast where we talk to growers from across the greenhouse industry about market trends, innovation, their biggest challenges and opportunities, and more. I'm Brian Sparks, editor of Greenhouse Grower. Dr. Allan Armitage is a familiar name to many in the greenhouse industry. He's been a professor, trial manager, consultant, and so much more. He's written several books that highlight his love of plants. He takes plant lovers on virtual garden tours on his Facebook page, and he's been a Greenhouse Grower contributing editor, columnist, and advisor for more than 40 years. But he's never been a podcast guest until now. I recently sat down with Allan for an in-depth conversation about how he developed his passion for plants and gardening, how growers and retailers can better connect and learn from consumers, and more. Here's our conversation and your chance to get to know the man under the hat just a little better. So, Allan, I want to start with, because we're hopefully reaching people on a new platform here with our podcast. If you can just kind of give just a brief overview of your background in this industry, and then especially how that all led to what your role in the industry is today.
Good day, Brian. It's great talking with you and anyone else who's listening to this. We are in the middle of a chilly weather in this country, and even where I am here in North Georgia in the 20s.
Now we're in the teens first.
I know. And we're in the 20s at night, and it's just really good because look, most people in the real world don't realize how important cold is for the health of plants once they get planted.
Yeah.
Not so much for annuals, of course, but for perennials and shrubs and trees, anything that's perennial. Cold weather really helps a lot. I know that's not what you asked me, but it just came up. You go, everybody complaining about this weather. Well, the more we get of this, the better our gardens, our landscapes are going to return for next year. So, but anyway, how I got in this is really, really weird, right? They, I'm supposedly know something about this horticultural stuff and greenhouse stuff and garden and retail and all. But the fact is, I had no training whatsoever in plants, gardening, horticulture. Uh, as a kid, I didn't have any mother patting me on the head and going out in the garden. I had, and I say training, I really had no interest in any of this stuff. Even when I went to college, and I went to college at McGill University, and ended up in a sort of an ag program, kind of, because my brother was in it. But having said that, I graduated in botany only because I thought it was kind of interesting. Yeah, but never anything to do with trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, greenhouses, or anything. I'm making a long story here, and I don't mean to, but I discovered all this stuff on my own because I enjoyed the gardening aspect. I loved watching a tulip come up or, a plant come up. And then I became, I knew more than a guy next door. So I sort of became a guru, which means I knew nothing, but I knew a little bit more than they did. And it wasn't until, I actually written about this. It wasn't until I decided to get myself very, very much involved in this and went back to school after being a high school teacher for 7 years. I taught botany and I taught math to high school. But I also had to start a little landscape company, those kind of people you hate to think about. Go get a little red truck and a wheelbarrow and they're in business. But the fact is, where I grew up in Montreal, in the landscape business, you were either Italian or French. And so my name translates well to Armitage. My good friend Louis Santini and I got together and away we went. Uh, but so we did that. And as a school teacher, I could do that in the summer, but I was enjoying it so much, it was interfering with the teaching. And it was time to make a decision on what I'm going to do. And so I ended up at the University of Guelph, in Guelph, Ontario. I had a fabulous horticulture program, and I somehow snuck in there. I don't know how, and that was really the beginning of how I got into mm, the the information, the love, the passion of what we do.
Okay.
Quite a journey.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And, for those who are familiar with you, I mean, you can just go to our own website and just find a long archive of of the columns that you've written, covering everything from plants to trends to, I know the big thing now is solution gardening and just all the ideas and insights that you've been able to share with our audience, in so many different ways. I mean, I'm sure, when you first started writing, it was the monthly column that went on print and that was pretty much it. And now, you've got the online version of the column, you've got the videos we've been doing, you've got this. I mean, things change quickly.
Well, I got to tell one story because I think we all get to how we get to where we are through, as I've mentioned 1,000 times, what I call the yogi concept. The our great philosopher Yogi Berra said that when the path forks, take it. And essentially, that's how we all got to where we are. Every single one. Some path fork somewhere, and we took it for better or for worse.
Yeah.
But I have to share one story because you asked me how I got in it, and this is one that, as a young kid, it 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 resonated later. So one of my jobs when I was in college and doing nothing in horticulture, I was a grave digger. I literally dug grave, literally with a shovel, and but at this particular cemetery, we had what was called perpetual care. And that didn't mean just mowing the grass, it actually meant planting the gravesite. So we put the soil back on the gravesite. We had a little tiny greenhouse where we did, alternate terraces, green things, red things, and we planted it.
Mhm.
It was almost like a floral clock, because with all these little and it was quite lovely, quite truthfully. And I learned a little bit there, but I was a job. I was getting paid $1 an hour or whatever. Didn't much matter. But one day, after a hard day's digging and a hard day's planting and a hard day this, about 5 o'clock, I was, finishing up, and this new grave site, which we had planted about, a few days before,
Yeah.
uh, a family was coming up the hill. And they were, of course, rather, they were sad. They were mourning. Their loved one had just passed away. Uh, and as they walked up, this is a true story. I can't make this up. As they walked up to the gravesite, they saw the flowers.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, their whole mood changed. They were still grieving, of course, but it was beautiful what they were seeing.
Oh, wow.
It was, as they said, someone cared.
Yeah.
And, I was behind a tree, staying out of sight, and I said to myself, "Wow, maybe there is something in this flower stuff. Maybe there is something a little bit deeper than, my dummy brain could register at the time." And, I remember that, and in fact, it took me a few years to really let that, coagulate in my brain, but that's certainly one of the reasons I got in it. It made people happy. So
Oh, wow.
that's one of my little yogi stories.
I would say I don't think you're gonna find it as unique of a gateway story as you're gonna find there. So.
No, it was really something, and I just it was really quite something.
Oh, wow.
That's that but there's lots of ways. I actually, for anybody who's interested, I was a challenge, and I wrote a little book called "It's Not Just About the Hat," and that's how I got here from there, and anybody who, wants to know more, it's in there.
That's a great read too. I've read it myself, so that I mean, you want to learn a lot. That's a good place to
Uh,
start. So.
well, anyway, so we all have our own stories, to be
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. I wanna spend a lot of this conversation looking ahead to what you're seeing for the coming year, but before we do that, just to kinda look back, over this past year and the past couple of years, this industry's gone through so many different changes. So, yeah, a as you talk to both growers and then, garden retailers as well, if you wanna talk about just some of the challenges that you see the growers deal with, and also maybe just some of the biggest success stories that you've seen along the way.
Well, the challenges are always there. Uh, Challenges, on in growing anything,
Yeah.
and the price of plastics, the price of soil, the price of everything tends to go up, and whether or not you can even get it. Of course, COVID was a great, and I say that in quotations, a great turning point in realizing how vulnerable we are to all of these things. Now, as an industry, we did well with COVID, meaning that people got out more. They appreciated the ability to to work in the garden.
Yeah.
We're one of the industries that actually did very well because of the fact that people had more time. But we also realized that things were difficult to get. We could not get people, and that has been one of our biggest issues and continues to be a big issue
Yeah.
on getting people who, A, will stay with the program, and it's great if you have a family business, but many people don't have family businesses, and they still have to find good people. And training meaning helping them succeed so that you will succeed is an issue that always, to me, I see when I visit growers.
Sure.
And when I visit growers, they have great people. I mean, through our Medal of Excellence program, Brian, how fabulous some of these growers are. And they don't rely just on themselves. They're the first to tell you that they get great help. But that is always a challenge. And anybody I've talked to says that's true. And the normal stuff, I said there's nothing normal about weather anymore. It's getting higher and lower.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, whatever we call this, climate change, global warming, whatever it's called, it's affecting our climate. It's affecting how soon hot weather comes. And for some retailers or landscape, whatever, hot weather is it makes it tougher for some of these plants to really do well.
Yeah.
Now, that means that so those are I mean, that's the challenge. The weather is always a challenge. As far as, specific things, there's new crops coming out all the time. Uh, how many new spigelias do I get in because somebody said that it's gonna be a great plant and we're gonna order it? So, those are always and again, many of our growers love this stuff. They have to have new and so that's not the issue of new. The issue is how do I treat them and, how much money am I gonna put into these programs? Uh, some of the things I see, but nothing has really changed since the beginning of time. We gotta keep the greenhouse going properly, gotta keep the bugs, the insects, etcetera, and we're doing that much better than we ever have done before, so there's some good times ahead.
Okay. Well, and speaking of that, I kind of want to get your take on that as well. So, I mean, I came into this industry roughly 8, 9 years ago, and I heard stories about some of the peaks and valleys of the industry you saw before that, and the struggles that would take place a lot of times when industry would try to come back from, severe dips in the market. I think, as you emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, yeah, obviously there was a great couple of years in the middle there for the industry and some challenges along the way, but you look at, for example, what Charlie Hall has talked about, where the new normal seems like it's higher than it was pre-COVID, which seems like a good thing. So, do you have any thoughts on just why that might be the case? Why this is a time where we're not seeing those huge hills and valleys, where I think maybe we're topping out at a higher place than where we have been in the past.
You know, I I love Charlie, and I agree with what he's saying. I mean, he's got the data to back it. I think we were after COVID kind of settled down, and we were in 2021 or 22, whatever, and people kept asking, "Well, okay, I don't have the same numbers I had during COVID, but they're higher than they were before COVID." And I think we're still sort of there.
Yeah.
And the data suggests we are, and the data suggests that those living habits, if I can use that term, where people got outside more, they discovered a garden, or they discovered that even mowing the grass wasn't all that big a deal. I think those people are still with us. However, we're still going to have peaks. We're, no, I mean, all we need is another recession somewhere or another, housing crash and, all of a sudden plants aren't being put in and those aren't going to go away. But I love the idea that people are confident because confidence begets confidence in the market. And so you're going to be hopefully nothing outside your control happens, like the market crashes or something. But
Yeah.
you know, you, going to have ups and downs for sure. And those who are successful have more ups and downs to be sure.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I got just before we started this call, I got off a similar call where we were talking about, how can a growing operation evolve? And one of the things that the people I was talking to focused on was embracing and accepting the challenges that are in front of you. I thought that was a great point where it seems like if you're going to drive forward, it's not going to be by doing the same thing year over year. It's looking for new things, even if it's a risk. Try it out, see if it works, accept that challenge and embrace it.
No, I couldn't agree more. And it doesn't matter what the industry is, quite truthfully, whether it's a car dealership or whether it's manufacturing pianos. I mean, it doesn't matter. We all are looking forward and we all are taking some risks. And heck, I write a book, I'm taking a tremendous risk, believe me. I don't know if anybody's gonna read the darn thing, but, it's not quite the amount of money that you're saying when you're gonna do 10 acres of geraniums, but the fact is, we all are going forward. And you just take a geranium, for example. When I got into this business 1,000 years ago, it seems, geraniums were geraniums. Most were red.
Yeah.
So that was I'll just say the 1980s, okay? Just for lack of a better term. The seed geranium was introduced. In fact, at Michigan State, we did a lot of the original work on seed geraniums. Nobody ever heard of a geranium from seed. Okay. The seed geraniums went way up because it was an easy way to do it. The seed was good, yada, yada. But over time, we have now more vegetative stuff in geraniums again. And what happened with geraniums on the breeding side is we have these hybrids now. The hybrids between the ivy geranium and the zonal geranium, and they're so much better.
Yeah.
Now, when they were first introduced, people didn't know what to do with them. Let's face it, those who took a risk, excuse me, Brandon, those who took a risk and put them in, the landscapers loved them, and man, they were off to the races.
Yeah.
And today at cast and everything else, you see more and more hybrids all the time. The old seed geranium is still around, but it hasn't, it hasn't evolved like these other ones have. So yeah, there was a risk there, and there still is a risk. People still want geraniums with all these other cool plants we have. But I think that those are the kind of things that I won't say the good growers, but the growers who are looking forward to the future are looking to what's going on out there and how they can take advantage of it.
Okay.
And sometimes they miss the boat, and sometimes they are the boat. So,
Yeah. Hey, that's true. One of the things that I also want to ask you about is, your outreach extends both to growers and then retailers and just folks who have those direct connections with consumers. So, if you're a retailer, how what are the best ways that you can keep up with and then respond to what consumers are looking for when it comes to plants? And then kind of tied into that as well, we were talking right before we started this conversation about some training that you're doing. So how do you then extend that to your team so that, if you've got, whether it's a growing team, whether it's a team that's in your store, having the right conversations with consumers and finding out what they're looking for?
well, I think if we sort of change the topic, as you mentioned a little bit to the, should we say, garden center retailer who are dealing with the real world. They're dealing with my daughters. And I can't think of any more difficult when it comes to this kind of stuff. But the fact is, people who are coming in or people who are coming in to buy plants, they don't know the plant. They really don't. I mean, they may have read about it and they know a geranium, they know a petunia, but they don't know a nepeta and they don't know a spigelia. They don't, and yet these fill a great void in the landscape palette. So what are they asking? They're mostly asking, what plant do I use for this particular problem? Shade, be it wet, be it dry, be it a ground cover. And as I don't know when and I wasn't just me, but one of certain one coined the term solution gardening.
Now,
It's all to me. If I'm a retailer, I want to be sure that my people, my crew, knows what plants grow particularly well in dry shade, wet shade, or any shade. Now that's hard to teach all the time, but I want to know that people recognize the fact that most of the consumers who come in aren't looking for a particular plant; they're looking for a solution.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, color sells. So, I mean, if you just put out beautiful color, people will buy it. But if people are asking the questions they're asking is not so much what's new, because that's what the retailer can show somebody and get excited about it because they're excited, but they're asking about what works.
Yeah.
And so the solution gardening is one of the things for sure I think is, I don't know if it's a major trend, but it's something that's happening out there. And anybody in the retail side should figure out how to make it easier for the consumer to find more than just sun and shade plants.
Right.
Uh, and the other things, we have trends that have been going on for some time. And I think most of the retailers recognize that they better have a section on native plants. That's not going to go away.
Yeah.
And for those growers who are growing native plants, especially for landscapers doing work for any government entity, whether it's your township, your town, or your federal, it's going to be native plants.
Right.
They need to have that in their back pocket so that they can tell people, sure, we got it. You don't want it, we got it.
Yeah.
And taking that to the next stage of consumers, they don't I won't say they don't care about native plants.
Right.
They love this idea of native plants. Sure, they do. And they may come in and say, well, it has to be native, especially those who have some master gardeners or whatever else organized. But the whole idea of what we have done in this industry is take that native thing, again, some people are not happy with it, and made a native R thing out of it.
Right.
So we can still sell the species echinacea. It's great. But now we have all these other beautiful echinaceas, which are essentially cultivars of native plants or nativars, and that's what my daughters are buying because it's native, and you can argue with me all you want about what's native and what's not native, but the nativars are certainly got the native blood. Pollinators still pollinate them, and it gives, and they're just quite beautiful. So I think that trend is not going away.
Okay.
Uh,
How do you see that then extending to, if you're a retailer and you've got a team who's walking through the store floor every day talking to customers, especially if they're newer to your team, they may not have some of that background in plants or horticulture. How does that extend to how they then communicate with those consumers?
It's really hard. I wish that I'm doing tell what I would do if anybody else, people are asking me, unfortunately, is I call it common sense gardening or common sense answers. For instance, Brian, if I'm in the retail shop and it's that time when hydrangeas are out there, okay? Oh my goodness, I will guarantee you that I will be asked about pruning hydrangeas. I will be asked about, was this hydrangea pruned like that hydrangea? Does the mop head have the same thing as a panicle type? I guarantee you people are frightened
Ah.
of food. They're frightened of hitting, just when you got your first computer, you're afraid to hit all these keys. They're frightened of it, and we don't want to frighten our gardeners away. So, I'll just use that as an example, Brian. If you asked me, how can I train somebody about all these pruning things? They're not going back to school to learn it. They just don't know. You give them the answer in 4 words. Any plant. So, Brian, if I'm training you and you really don't know about this stuff, and you're worried because someone's going to ask you about pruning,
Yeah.
and you don't really know a lot. And hopefully your boss or whoever owns it knows a whole lot more. If you need, you can go to them. But you're on the floor right now, and Brian saying, "Well, how do I prune this hydrangea?" And if you start telling me about new wood, old wood, I am lost. 4 words: cut back after flowering. That's all you have to know for any plant. Whether it's a hydrangea that blooms on new wood, or you can cut back that anytime, cut back at, or an old wood like a mop head, you put it back in the summer after it finishes flowering. So whether it's a perennial or a shrub. Anyway, but my point is we can go on, and I do this whole common sense thing on pruning, on fertilizing, on watering, on planting, on this whole what's the difference between, well, invasive versus aggressive.
Right.
It's 30 seconds. We can train people, but we can't expect them to know it without giving them something simple that they can take out of their back pocket. That's me. and everybody does it differently. But when I go to grower, especially garden centers or retailers, that's what I try to do with their staff. I mean, because we don't, especially in spring, your staff doesn't have time to discuss this with people. You got 10 people over every every staff member,
Yeah.
so getting a little something in their back pocket that they can bring out when they get these questions.
Yeah.
It makes it easier.
Well, so and just to kind of wrap up the discussion on the plants themselves here. So, one thing I do wonder about sometimes is you've got breeders constantly working on new varieties, new programs, et cetera. They're trying to address both what a grower wants out of a plant, whether it's, less PGRs or multiple turns in the season versus what a consumer might be looking for. How do you see the breeding side of the industry being able to address both of those concerns versus what a grower wants and what a consumer is going to want?
I think I think that's well, it's a good question, but it's not as complex as people make it out to be. The fact is the grower should rule the roost. And the grower should rule the roost in that if I can get a drain in that comes off the bench, a week early,
Yeah.
I'm gonna grow it. Okay. And I'll come back to the grower in a minute. But so the breeder, if they are smart, and they are, we got great breeders, they have goals they're trying to reach, not just make another pink geranium, but quicker, less PGR, as we said, in perennials, there's a flower first year. Does it need to be cold? Does it, how tall? And of course, the breeding over the years has essentially been compact and flowering quickly.
Yeah.
So the grower can really get on there, and that's what the breeder's doing, and that's what the breeder should do. The breeder should work with the grower, and of course, they're not going to breed an ugly plant. I mean, come on. But who really rules the roost in the marketing of plants and what breeding material is actually going to find its way to the public,
Yeah.
really rules the roost, for better or for worse, are the box stores. And don't get mad at me. I think everybody who has a retail shop has their way of working around with through the box stores. It's just the way life is.
Yeah.
But if I have a plant that I can sell 10,000 to a box store versus 500 to independent garden centers, that's probably the one I'm gonna grow. An independent garden center can get it too. It's just that's sort of the reality of life. And what does a breeder do, and who's the one that makes the decisions as to what plants make it to the marketplace?
Yeah.
Of course, we're fortunate we have crazy, wonderful, independent consumers, garden centers, landscapers that really want that weird stuff. And being proven winners started out as weird stuff. Okay, I mean, they had this thing called scaevola. Nobody ever heard of scaevola. They brought out these weird things, and then look what happened to that. So we always need that group as well. And the annual market is so entirely different than the perennial market, which is entirely different than the shrub and tree market. Uh, so all of these things, smart people can figure it away. But you got to figure out who's buying the stuff, and that's way often times people grow. And again, I'll just to finish off this. Not for a minute do I think that we are ruled by the box store.
Right.
We have way too much independence out there. And if we want to work with the box stores, we can. If we don't, we're doing just fine. Thank you. And the box stores are not the enemy. They're just one more market outlet.
Right.
But independent garden centers, they really have to, as we talked about before, get the solution gardening going. They are so much better at explaining things to a consumer than a box store is. And price is not the issue. The ability that they have something a little bit different makes a huge difference for the independent people. And I think there is no end to the creativity of what an independent garden center can do. And they're going to be with us forever.
Yeah.
It's just one more market outlet.
Well, and as you talk about that, I do want to look ahead a little bit. So, just looking at 2025, because I mean, we're talking here in mid-January, and frankly beyond that, Are there specific trends that you see driving the success of the industry? And then kind of tied to that, just what excites you the most when it comes to, where we're going? I know that's a lot.
No, no, I mean, the specific trends, if you're looking, so I have my little neighborhood here, uh, and it's got mostly fairly small properties. I mean, when I say small, in town, but there's some bigger stuff.
Yeah.
I will say 80%, if not 90% of people use landscape logo guys to take care of their properties. And that, I wish it wasn't. I say that, but that other 10% or whatever, man, they are passionate. So the people that are just sort of throwing in plants in a new development, or throwing in plants because they need to have some, you know, small planting underneath the windows or in front of the house, they're probably using the same stuff they used 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that stuff is not going to go away. Spirea van Hoodii or some of the hollies, they've been around forever because they work. And I have no issues at all with plants that work. Yet the and you look at shopping centers or hotels and pansies and violas, at least in this part of the world, I don't have a clue what they're using because they're getting those plants that the grower is giving them. And hopefully the grower has got some of the newer stuff and
Yeah.
for all a period of time. So those are never going to go away. But I think the trends of the garden center, we already talked about them. Get the solutions out there so people have a reason to come into the garden center. I think the whole idea of what you can sell to the consumer, certainly more than a plant,
Yeah.
obviously with solutions, certainly more than a plant, natives, nativars, pollinators, those are trends that are going to be with us for a good long time. Now, some new plant may come up and take the world by storm. Nobody is ever going to get rid of tomatoes or peppers
Yeah.
or, that whole idea of patio vegetables, I think was fabulous
Yeah.
because it allowed people to take a vegetable that maybe in their garden be 4 feet tall to be 2 feet tall in the container and still bear fruit.
Right.
Like the whole idea of these berries and all these things, these are trends. And the trend is not only will we have new, but how do we market new? And people, and I'd say people, I mean, I often talk about gardeners and 90% of the greenhouse guys don't know a gardener from a schmardner. They're just happy to see an empty greenhouse. Okay. Doesn't mean they don't believe in what they do, but they don't have gardeners running through their greenhouses, whereas a garden center does. And so when they see these really cool, fun things like tomatoes that are bred for containers or ornamental vegetables, that can be put in for fruit or whatever, fennel being an example. Like can look beautiful in the garden and still have a function as a culinary plant.
Right.
These are trends I think that people need to really get in front of people because listen, if nothing else, gardening is creative. If nothing else. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with 100 red geraniums, especially if they grow well. But 100 red geraniums that look crappy in the middle of August is not doing anybody any favors. So we have to have other things as well. But as you say, I hope everyone realizes it's just me talking. I have no idea if anybody agrees with me.
Oh, well, I mean, you've been around for a while, so I mean, I do think people want to hear what you have to say and take it to heart. I kind of want to go back to that, as you start to wind down a little bit, just getting back to, you're part of this industry. And I know I mentioned earlier, when you first started writing, for example, for Greenhouse Grower, it was the print column, and now there's so many different ways just within our own brands platforms to reach folks. I know you've got a series of books that are out there and an app as well. Do you want to talk about any of those and just different ways you?
But any of them, if people want to know, actually, when I started my first column, Brian,
Yeah.
I did this, and I was talking to. It was actually at I think our Medal of Excellence or something, and somehow it came up that in 2004,
Mm.
no, 2024, no, just 2 years ago, 2024, I had been writing this column for 40 years, every single month, and people looked at me and they said out loud, I haven't been born when you started this. So I'm not even 40. So I guess I have been doing this for some time. I mentioned the seed geranium is one of the things that, you know, we played with. But so I've been doing that column for a long time and I'm still doing it. And I'm still hopefully not just talking about plants, but talking about all these things you and I are talking about today. You mentioned about books, and I think books are still out there. I mean, we get everything online and, you know, all that Audible stuff and everything, but books are still important, particularly the people in the industry and the people who enjoy what we're doing. If you want to, at least from my perspective, you want to learn about perennials, get my perennial book. If you want to learn about climbers, get the climber book. You can never learn too much. You may not use half of it, but you can never learn too much. And anybody who's absolutely curious about, how where I came from, the book on it's not just about the hat, it's kind of fun. The book on where plant gets their names. It doesn't make you a better grower, a better retailer. But the book Naked Ladies and Forget Me Nots, How Plants Get Their Names, is stories. And if nothing else, people love stories. Will it make you sell any more epimediums? Heck if I know. But at least you know where the thing came from. And it's called Baron Wort. But anyway, so those kind of things I've done. I developed the app, as you mentioned. I think the app is I think the app is particularly good, and it has been shown to be good for retailers because people on the floor they can go to the app and look at what lungwort is and how to grow it if they don't know. And certainly gardeners are using it, and all of that. I got a ton of stuff out there, and I guess I just enjoy doing it. Um,
Well, and one of the things that I love too is just your Facebook Live just walks through the garden. I mean, what better way to show people what plants look like than to walk around in the garden and show them?
and again, we think about these fabulous greenhouses full of fabulous plants, and we kind of forget about where our beginnings are. Our beginnings are in a garden, whether it's your garden, my garden, or hotel garden, or what doesn't matter. It's in a garden because people love to walk around and see beautiful plants. And we can never lose that fact that what we do with PGRs, environmental controls, and breeding for this and that is all based on the fact that somebody's going to see it in a garden.
Yeah.
And we kind of get away from that when we get the heavy science and heavy technology and heavy this. We kind of forget that that's where the stuff's going eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Um, I want to wrap up with just a two-part question for you. And again, you're going to have folks listening to this who have never met or heard from you before. You're going to have folks who have been listening to your advice for many years now. Um, First question is, tell me something that they might not already know about you. And then, as you look at everything that you've done, what are you most proud of in terms of what you've been able to bring to this industry?
Well, I'm sure there's a ton of people. Well, I know there's a ton of people that never heard of me, and that's fine. And if they happen to stumble onto this podcast and wonder what they're doing, I'm a plant guy and all these things we talk about, but I have a lot more than that. Every month I do a column called My Favorite Things, where I talk about a book I've read. I've done horticulture, by the way. I talk about a place I've visited. I talk about, of course, a plant and a garden I seen somewhere, not private, but public.
Yeah.
And people really kind of like that. So I do that. Um, but what people don't, well, I guess if I say, what do they don't know? Well, I'm a tennis player,
Yeah.
okay? And I've been playing tennis for a while, and I've been doing, yeah, reasonably successful. We've done very, very well. And, those are the things that you have to have outside your business. You have to have hobbies or things you enjoy doing, whether it's stamp collecting or doing jigsaw puzzles or playing tennis. And I have a ton of those things, but one of my passions is playing tennis.
Well, I think you're underestimating yourself in terms of doing well. But you've won a couple of tournaments in different areas. That's great.
And done well. We've won the national championship against every other state, but, it's good luck, good golly, but good fun, and I think if everybody can I think I wrote a column not so long ago, Brian, where I said, "I am your father. Get out of the greenhouse and go on vacation. We'll be there when you come back, and you will be better for it." And we all need that, whether it's vacation or whatever you like doing.
Oh, yeah.
That's something that people certainly wouldn't know. Like, what I'm most proud of, I think Well, I'm proud of still doing what I'm doing, which is it's been quite it's and, I'm still, I think I won't know if I'm at the top of my game. I'm still up there somewhere. Um, about a couple of things that I got into that I never believed would be quite so successful, and when I first started doing research on domestic production of cut flowers, and everybody said that it can't do it. It's all coming out of South America. It's everything. We'll never have a business here. Well, that little bit of research that we did started this thing called the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. I've got a couple books on it, and there's over 2,000 members in that group. And every week, I get comments from cut flower growers. I don't know where they come from, and I don't know how successful they are. And I don't know how, but it's a passion. And then that's one of the things that I think I've sort of faked, and it's made a difference to those people in that business. I'm started the Georgia University Georgia Trial Gardens, and that has got a life of its own as well, where we started back in the '80s, and it's still going strong. So those kind of things where you have a bit of a legacy, it's kinda nice to know that you're doing something right.
Well, and like you used the word passion there, and to me, that's if there's one word that I love bringing up when I talk to growers, it's their passion. What are you passionate about? I mean, there's folks in various sectors of this industry. There could be growers, there could be suppliers, there could be researchers, whatever. Everybody's got a passion for part of this industry, and I think that's really critical. If you have that, if you don't have that, I guess I would ask, why are you in this industry? But if you do, how can you keep that passion going? So I really appreciate that.
I'll just we're probably running out of time, right? I'll finish off another story about what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So, I played basketball. I've done a bunch. I played basketball in college, all that stuff, and we had these bunch of guys that, wanted to do well, and I was probably Division 10 when it comes to our team, but nevertheless, we worked hard, we had a grand time, and, one of the guys never got any playing time, but he loved the game. He was gonna come out every but never got any playing time. He wasn't really all that good, but the coach came up to us and said, "Guys, you're doing this. I want to make sure you understand that the most important player right now is John, who sits on the bench, but is so passionate about what he does. He's always applauding, he's always screaming, he's always in the middle of it. And if all of you can have that passion, even when you're sitting on the bench, it's going to be great." And so you're absolutely correct, Brian. I call it the juice. Yeah, you got the juice, but it is a passion at the same time.
Thanks for joining us. You can learn more at greenhousegrower.com. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, and please leave us a rating as it helps other podcast listeners find the show.